Hello and welcome everyone. This is Holly Rice, starting the Activate Your Cognos Protection Plan for Administrative Components webinar. Thanks for joining us today on this first episode of our Motio Skills Session webinar series. This webinar series will focus on different ways to use Motio software so that you can achieve BI best practices at your organization. This first episode will dive into testing your Cognos administrative components. With me today is Edwin Van Megason, who is VP of Business Development at Motio, and we also have David Whitlow, who is an Enterprise Support Engineer at Motio. They will cover the introduction and demonstration today. Before I hand off to David and Edwin, I have a few housekeeping items to take care of. You'll notice at the bottom of your screen there is a menu with widgets that you can move around and control. Of particular importance is the slides window, which is where you will view the presentation, and it can be expanded and moved within your screen. The audio is controlled through the speakers on your computer, tablet, or mobile device, and is that red media widget. Other widgets to note are the purple Q&A icon, which is where you can submit your questions. Roger Moore, who leads Motio product development, is also here, and he will handle your questions either directly or at our Q&A session following the demo. The green icon on the far right is a short survey that we would appreciate your feedback on to let us know what kind of things you'd like to learn at our future skills session webinars. If you experience any technical issues, use the yellow question mark icon or just try refreshing your screen if you are experiencing a lag. And lastly, we are recording, so you can access this webinar later or share with your colleagues. Now I'm going to hand it off to Edwin Van Megason.
So thank you, Holly, for the introduction. So I think that skills are essential to have a solid foundation for your road towards successful analytics. And you want to work a little bit different than the road constructors here. And we recommend to have all the safety controls in place to assure reliable delivery of analytics. So we are starting these skill sessions to help your customers and your consumers to work smarter in IBM Cognos. And developing your skills will not only help you to work more efficient, but it also will help you to get happy customers. So today we will discuss how to get a protection plan in place to be proactive in case of issues. Because you don't want your system to be unattended while you're away or working on other stuff. Okay. So we had a customer case lately where sometimes reports were running fine, and some other times graphs wouldn't show up. And it was a difficult case because it happened now and then. It was hard for this customer to find out what it was, and it cost a lot of time to find the cause of this. But they found it after using Motio CI. And what happened was that sometimes when they restarted the dispatchers, one of the graphic surfaces didn't start up at one of the dispatchers. So when a report was running through that dispatcher, it would not show the graph. Well, would it run through another dispatcher? It would show the graph. So these are problems that are hard to find, and we will discuss a few of them later, and David will show you some. So what we want to assure and what we want to create in your environment is a smoke detector. A smoke detector that will warn you in case of problems. Okay, so I'm pretty curious what the audience is doing right now and how you are monitoring your system right now. So I would start a poll question, and I will give you some time to submit an answer here, and we will look at the results. Okay, if everybody was ready to and have answered, let's go to the results. Okay, so what we see is we have a few Motio CI customers on the line, which is good, and they use the product for that. We have only a few people who have other products. Few people go through checklists, but most of them just wait till end users notify them that something goes wrong. Well, and I think that you want to change that, and let's see how you can do that. So let me hand over here to David, and he will show you how you can have these smoke detectors in your environment.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Again, this is David Whitlow, and I'm a support engineer for Motio. Thank you, Edmund, for your introduction. So what we've got with Motio, if you have testing, is when you initially create your admin project, and this is the first project that gets versioned when you add an instance, there's going to be many assertions that are going to be added to your environment automatically. Although for our purposes today, we're going to focus on three. For test cases for assertions that monitor dispatchers, data sources, and roles. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you how they work and what goes on behind the scenes, what happens when they fail, and then we'll go into how you can automatically schedule them to run and receive notifications that there were failures, so that in the event there is, you don't have to consistently go in and check these things, or you don't have to wait for a customer or a VP to tell you that my report's not working. So the first of these is to monitor dispatchers. So under configuration in the admin project, you'll have all of your dispatchers that you would have in your BI environment. And if you expand and go to the bottom of that object, you'll note that there is a test case already here that monitors the dispatcher status. And if we run that test case, it will show you in the run history that it's running. And in what's basically happening is it's determining if the dispatcher is running, that the expected services are present, and if there's any service problems. You can see that it only takes a few moments to run, and our dispatcher is up and running and functional. And it's just as simple as that. And a little bit later in the presentation, I'll show you can schedule that to run at regular intervals. The second type of test case that we want to talk about has to do with monitoring data sources. So again, if you go to directory here under the admin project, you'll note that you've got your data sources, and they all exist as objects as defined in Cognos, and they were versioned as part of Motio. Again, you've got the audit data source test case that you can run, and it will show you, again, the run history. Essentially, what's happening behind the scenes is it's validating that it can sign on to the database, which, of course, tells us that the database is A, up, or if B, the password's expired. Sometimes it happens that DBAs will expire passwords simply because of security precautions, or maybe the database could even be down. There's any number of things that could be present causing problems with the communications between Cognos and the data source. And again, you always want to know about that. So, we had a case just a couple of weeks ago where it happened that the password expired, and we were able to use Motio to determine that. So if we were to go in and we break the connection to the data source, we can just modify the sign on, and I'll just change the user ID. We come back over to the data source, and we test it, you can see that it fails the logon. So if we come back to Motio and we rerun the test case, again, it's going through and it's going to test that it can sign on to the data source. And it will take a few moments to complete. Again, what's happening behind the scenes is it's validating that the database is able to be signed into. And you can see now that it's failed. So that's a really good thing for you to know, because if someone tries to run a report that's using that data source, the report's not going to run properly. The third type of test case we want to talk about concerns membership stability. So you can see here that each of these roles in Cognos, again, has an automatic test case that was added, and this one monitors membership stability. So if we look at that, and you can see that it's had some successful runs. And we'll run that for you so you can see that it's going to be successful. And again, what it's basically doing is it's comparing the membership with previous runs. So does that mean that there's any changes in users or groups that have been added to that role? And it's successful. But if we come to Cognos and we go in and we actually make a change to that, we'll go ahead and add a new user. We'll just take someone at random. Okay, now we've got a new member of this role. So if we come back and rerun this test case, then it's going to go through and check to see if there's consistency between the last time it ran compared to this time. And what will happen is we should get a warning, and we did. And you can look at the results under details that it says the membership has changed, essentially telling us, hey, this membership's changed, and now we need to, you want to go find out why. Was it expected? Possibly, probably. But if it wasn't, then you want to start, looking at who made this change and then why. So these are all great, but how can you really get this in a meaningful, get meaningful information without having to come in here and constantly monitor these test cases? Well, we can do that by the use of what we call test scripts. So in Motio, if you have testing, you have a test script node. And under it, you'll have some that come pre-populated. Generally, you have all. And so that's all of the test cases that make up this project. But we can add new test scripts and add criteria to filter them down. So in this case, we'll add a test script called admin. So when you add a new test script, you'll note that it essentially adds all of the test scripts. We have to come into the test script settings and set some specific criteria to filter down to the specific levels we want to go. So when we're going to add multiple criteria, we always combine using OR. So then we can add, and there's a number of things that you can add as part of it. In this case, we're going to do path is under, and we're going to set the path specifically to the dispatcher. And then I hit OK. So then we want to add another criteria. And we want to come to directory, Cognos, and we'll just take our audit. And so now we've got that path, and then we'll do one more to monitor that system role. So now, obviously that may be a little restrictive and take a lot of time. You may select at a higher level so that you get a larger sampling of test cases, but for our purposes here, I wanted it to filter down to just these three. So the test script settings now will only give us those three test scripts. So a couple of things to note, you can schedule this to run. So you simply, in the test script settings, click on Add Schedule, and most likely in this instance, you're going to want to set a frequency. And you're going to want to set that threshold relatively low. There's very little overhead in running these administrative test cases. So you could have these run every 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever seems reasonable to you, that you'd want to run these. I'll set this for 15 minutes. So what's going to happen now is it's going to run all of these test cases that make up the criteria I've set every 15 minutes. And it's going to automatically email me if there has been a failure. And you can have it email you on, if it was, on all, the status on all of it, failures only. You can have it email on scheduled runs or all runs. So a couple of things to note here. So you can run this manually. And so let me just add something really quick about the warning message about the system administrator assertion. So let's say that, you've made a change and that's a change that you want to keep. So all you have to do from that point is just reset the assertion. So that will reset the assertion. So the next time you run it, it will see that new user that we've added, and then it will be successful. So if we run this test case, you can just run all, and it's a fairly quick process. And see that first it's doing through and it's checking that system administrator's role, and it's checking the data connection to the audit database, which is still broken, and it's checking for the dispatcher's functionality. And as you can see, we got a failure on the audit database, and then we've got successes on the other two assertions. So then you're going to get an email message. And that email message is going to look something like this. By playing properly, you will get an email message that look like basically telling you that there's a failure in the a failure with the test case, and then you would be able to take the appropriate action. There it is. That's what it looks like. So that would tell you that there was a number of failed test cases, and by doing this, you don't have to consistently go into Motio and check these things or depend on people to tell you, especially customers, or if it's a VP running reports, anything but your consumers telling you there's a problem. This way you look like you're on top of things all the time, and you don't have anyone coming to you to say there's a problem. So with that, I will turn it back over to Edwin, who has some closing remarks. And I do thank you for your time.
All right. Well, thank you, David. And we have seen these three test cases, but there are other assertions available as well. And we deliver Assertion Studio, so you can build your own assertions. And we have customers who also build some report performance assertions or data checking assertions to be sure that things work well in their environment. So there are a lot of possibilities there. So let's see if there are any questions at the audience right now.
Sure. So I've been collecting the questions as we've gone through here, and if you do have additional questions, go ahead and put those into the chat. I think we'll be able to get through a few of them. I've selected out a few that we can go over, and then if there are any others, we will address those offline. So one of the questions I had says you showed that a test that will determine if a membership of a role has changed, and the person wants to know if the same can be done for capabilities. And yes, it's very, very similar for capabilities. You have a similar assertion with stability on the policy set, and you can set up the very same things to monitor those. And then another question that we have here says, can you check for membership of the roles for specific values? So with the test that David showed you was alerting you if there was a change, any type of change that went into the system for that particular role. It was alerting you, and this particular question wants to know if you could know if if the values were set to a particular values. And yes, you can do that. So if you wanted to know if the system administrator role had a certain set of users on it, then you could do that. Also, I had a customer that had a one-to-one mapping from their AD groups to their Cognos groups, and we were able to do that as well and verify that. And so we can handle that. There's a question that just came in, someone asking about if this is limited to connectivity issues or if you can write tests around data quality. And you absolutely can write test cases for data quality and data validation. We have probably covered that in a previous webinar series. If not, we can look at it for a future one. But that's one of the strengths of the product, actually, is doing data validation. And one of the things that we focus a lot on in terms of if you have a dashboard or a report, can you validate that the data is correct? And that is part of what we're able to do. And then I think there's another question here that came in around performance. And we can, when we run the test cases, so this particular webinar was focused on testing administrative content, but we can test other content as well, reports, dashboard, various other things. And if you want to be alerted if one of those is executing in an excessive time frame, we can alert you to that as well. And I'm trying to check what the other questions are. And so then there's a question about getting notified. I think it's really around like if Motio CI goes down and comes back up, and there's always a notification for that posted on the timeline, but you could be notified for that as well. A couple of other things here. So one question is it possible to do something other than email for notification? And that is possible. We've had a few different scenarios. One scenario that we worked with a customer recently was a case where they wanted to have a ticket open in their help desk when a dispatcher or data source went down, and we were able to facilitate that for the customer, and we actually turned that into a blog article, and that's on our website if you want to go check that out, or just contact us and we will point you to that information. Let me see what other questions we've got here. Okay, so it says, so there's a question here on Cognos Analytics. It's actually a couple different questions I've seen on Cognos Analytics. Says, does this support analytics? And what version of Motio CI supports Cognos Analytics? And so yes, Motio CI version 3.12 and later support Cognos Analytics, and the exact same functionality that you have or that David showed here would be available in Cognos Analytics. And I've got some questions around access, and there's a few different questions in this regard. And someone is saying they don't see the admin project, and another person is asking who has access to this admin project that David showed. And the answer to those are basically the same. There are, and I know those of you that are customers know this already, there are roles that control who can access these different projects like this admin project. And if you don't see it, then that's most likely the cause is that you do not have the role. And so if you'll look in the Cognos namespace, there's a folder, Motio CI roles, and a projects roles folder, and a role for this admin project. There's a question here about timeouts and wanting to know if there is a timeout on this dispatcher check, and there is. I don't remember what the default for that is, but it can be configured because and this is probably more relevant for the dispatcher one than the data source one, although it pertains to both. If for some reason it doesn't communicate in the allotted time, then that is considered a failure. Okay. So there's somebody wanting the data source path again, and those are under, David showed that, but those are under the Cognos namespace. So in Motio CI, you browse to your admin package, directory, and then Cognos, and you will see all of the data sources available to you. Okay, that's about all we have time for today as far as questions that we can do on the live webinar, but I will go ahead and review the other questions and make sure we get answers out to all of you. Okay?
Yeah, and I'm pretty happy to see that we got a lot of questions that we're not able to answer them all on the webinar. So that's a good thing. So we will make sure that we make a summary of all the questions, and if we weren't able to answer your question, we'll get back to you and we'll publish that. So let me finish this session. We would be happy to see you at another session as well. Our next session will be on June 29. At that session, we will talk about impersonation. Impersonation is a pretty valuable feature, and people who had used Access Manager know about this feature. And it's available, and we'll talk about that, how you can help support by solving security issues or security-related issues with impersonation. So I hope to see you then again. Well, thank you all for joining this session, and don't forget to fill in the survey to let us know what you want to learn in next skills sessions. All right. Thank you all for joining.